Hey Bookbellas and fellas, today I'm going to discuss with you what I am currently reading. I actually only started recently reading more than one book a little bit ago. For a while there I was very picky. I didn't want to read more than one book at a time, but sometimes when you read a ton, you like to mix things up a little bit. You know, sometimes I want a little bit of romance, sometimes I want a little bit of adventure, sometimes I want a little bit of fantasy, and sometimes I want all three. So the first book that I am reading is on my Kindle, which I sometimes read on my phone. I switch between that and my actual Paperwhite. I'm sorry about the glare, and I'm sorry it's not bigger. Oh my god. I am so sorry that it's not bigger, but I don't have a physical copy of it. It's called A Stranger Hymn. This is a sequel to Rhapsodic by Laura Thausula. So the other day I read Rhapsodic, and I read it in one day. It's all the angsty fairy love that you would want, and it is amazing. I recently read, towards the beginning of the year, A Court of Mist and Fury, and I have to say this book reminds me a lot of that. So you have this girl named Calypso. She, coincidentally enough, is a siren, and she is a detective in modern day. Calypso has the power to manipulate people and get them to do whatever she wants just by speaking to them. Sometimes she can touch them, but mostly it's all in her voice, because, you know, sirens. So this is the cover of Rhapsodic. So when Calypso was a young girl, she committed a crime. She accidentally kills her stepfather. Her stepfather is not a good man, but he also is a supernatural being, and he's a very powerful one. He is a seer. He can predict things, so he's very valuable in the stock market. Well, Calypso remembers seeing this little black card that says the Bargainer, and so she whispers, "Bargainer, I want to make a deal." Suddenly he's there. At this point, Calypso is 15 years old and will be 16 in a few weeks. In the supernatural realm, 16 is considered an adult, but 15 is not. So he decides, out of the kindness of his heart, to do a favor for her because she is underage and help her get rid of the evidence. He sends her to a supernatural academy where she is very lonely because now she feels like she is a murderer, and it's really hard for her to connect with anybody because she feels like she has this huge secret lurking over her shoulder. So she decides, once again, she whispers, "Bargainer, let's make a deal." The bargainer once again materializes and says, "Why are you calling me? I thought I told you never to call me again." She starts bargaining with him because she's lonely and she remembers just how good looking he was. But she didn't really know much about him. So it's set up to where the beginning of every chapter is set up as a flashback, and then halfway through the chapter it is set up in modern day, and so you're kind of going back and forth for a while. But it's great because you learn all about their history in the first book. I could tell you what, I could not put this book down. It had all the angst. The Bargainer is actually a fairy king, and then you also have the siren to boot. And it has all of these really intriguing elements. And it is self-published. I don't usually read self-published books, but I really, really enjoyed this. I'm going to leave a link for it down at the bottom from Amazon because that is where I got it from. It's like $2 for the Kindle version of it. They also have it in paperback if you want. I really enjoyed this. I am actually in the middle of the second one right now, and I'm still very thoroughly enjoying it. So many elements remind me of A Court of Mist and Fury. The angsty romance, the back and forth, the compassion, you know, like the girl being kind of unsure about how he feels for her, and it was just this whole back and forth angsty romance, and you know, I am so here for that. So the second book that I am reading is Wicked Like a Wildfire by Anna Pulpovic. This is actually a reread for me because Fierce Like a Firestorm, which is a sequel, recently came out. I read this last year. I really enjoyed it. I read it during Hurricane Irma, and it was such a wonderful experience. It's a very slow burning magical realism, and I know that's not for everybody. Not everybody likes those. I know like that there was like a lot of back and forth, especially about Wild Beauty, but this is something that I thoroughly enjoyed. It had a little bit of romance and had a little bit of adventure and some mystery to it. The book actually takes place in Montenegro, which is on the coast of Serbia over in Europe. There are these twins, Iris and Melina, that have these special abilities. Melina's special ability has to do with music, whereas Iris can see fractals in flowers. So if she looks at a flower, she sees little fractals of that flower everywhere, and she is very skilled with color. They are twins, and everybody in this lineage is born with twins, including their mother. Because they live in such a remote area of Europe, there's not a ton of places like where this looks good to people, especially if they get caught doing it. They call it the gleam. And if they practice their arts in front of people, it looks like witchcraft to them. So one night, the neighbor sees them doing something in the backyard, and their mother, Jasmina, forbids them to do anything else with magic. And of course, as time goes on, their magics are slowly dwindling. That is, until Iris meets this very mysterious man who is very good looking. This book had such a fairy tale feel to it. There is so much myth, so much lore that's going on in this book. It was such an enjoyable read. I do highly recommend it. I don't want to say too much because I would like for you to experience it for yourself, especially if you are into whimsical style books. This is very whimsical. This is a very good time. And like I said, once again, it is very slow burning, but it is such a great book, and I am so happy to be rereading this. Next book that I am currently reading, I actually got this month for Book of the Month Club. It is The Silence of Girls by Pat Barker. This is actually considered a historical fantasy. This is about a woman named Brasius who lives in a cornering town to Troy. And now Troy has already been invaded by Achilles' army, and Achilles' army is now at her gate, banging it down to attack them. So Achilles does succeed in invading her kingdom, and she watches him murder her husband and her brothers. So after Achilles is done invading her town, he decides that he is going to take all the noblewomen on the ship back to his home. Achilles decides to take Brasius into his harem. Now, this is a romance, but it's told from a woman's perspective, which is what the buzz about this book has been. And I have to tell you, I just started today. I'm about 40 pages in, and I am really enjoying this. The details, the grittiness. Now, already I can tell you that there is a trigger warning for rape and violence and murder. And so if you're very sensitive to that, the book is probably not going to be for you, but it is placed in a Greek setting. And so I'm very excited to read this. It's only about just under 300 pages. It's not a long book. It won't take me long to get through, and I'm telling you right now, I'm probably gonna fly through it. The writing is so on point. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me, and if you like it, hit the little like thumb, hit subscribe. If you want to get emails every time I post, hit the little bell icon. And as always, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon.